Gunga Maheji, na Michelle McCauley Minania, Michelle McCauley de Gun de Alei. So, hi, my name is Michelle McCauley. I'm a Native American music educator. I am a member of the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe. I'm also Washoe and Shoshone and Quinault. And today I wanted to talk to you and bring you this new video for Thanksgiving, November 2021. And my old Thanksgiving video was 7 things you shouldn't be teaching for Thanksgiving. This video is going to concentrate on what you should be doing as an educator. This goes for music educators. This goes for any educator. If you're at the collegiate level, the high school level, middle school, any level that you're at, there are things that you must be doing today to be considered a culturally relevant educator, but overall it's just good teaching, right? If you are an admin and you're watching this, you're a principal, you're an evaluator, you're a collegiate professor, the way you critique people's lessons plans or your students' lesson plans, your staff's lesson plans, really comes from what your paradigm is and how much you actually know about holidays and about different cultures. So if you're lacking in areas of, really knowing about certain cultures, how are you able to give a fair evaluation to a teacher, right? And so we're focusing on Thanksgiving. What goes into a great Thanksgiving lesson? One that you can give, an excellent review to. If you are an educator, what gives you the ability to deliver great lesson plans? Do your lesson plans have to be based on facts? If you're in education, the answer to that needs to be yes. And in today's climate where you go into public schools or any schools really, we have so many diverse students from diverse backgrounds. However, Native American students are not in every classroom, and Native American history, anything to do about Native Americans, it largely goes unchecked, even if it's the smallest, the only mention that Native Americans really get in most classrooms are Thanksgiving. But oftentimes Native Americans aren't given a voice in the classroom. History books don't include us, and if they do, it's prior to the 1900s. So in today's teaching world, if you're an educator out there, or you're an evaluator, or you're someone who says that you prepare future teachers to go out into the teaching force, what are you preparing them for? And how are you dealing with the holiday Thanksgiving? And how many of you, I could start off with a question, how many of you know actual Native Americans? Most oftentimes, in all the educators that I know, that I've been at the different schools, more than likely, nobody really knows anybody, if at all. I mean, I may be your colleague, but if you've never come to my house, never come to my events or any cultural events, we are not necessarily friends, and our lives haven't really, intersected. Okay, so let's get into these 7 things you should be doing as an educator. This is anything to do with education. All right, so the first one that I wrote down, this is super important. You need to know the real story behind the creation of the holiday we now know as Thanksgiving in the United States. So I'm talking primarily about the United States. This does not concern Canada. This does not concern Australia or any other country. We are talking specifically about the United States. When was it created? Who was it created by? And why was it created? Now let's get into the aspect of being a high-level performing educator, right? So if you are, if you are going to be the best educator that you can be, is it worth it to know the real facts behind why this holiday exists? Can you call yourself a high-performing, excellent educator without knowing the facts behind Thanksgiving? If you are an evaluator, a principal, and you have staff members who are still perpetuating and still continuing to teach the old version of what the real Thanksgiving is, maybe you and your staff don't know the real reason behind that. Can you call yourself an excellent institution by not knowing these things? You would think educating, right? You need to know the facts about history in order to be able to move forward. This is step number one. You gotta know the real story behind this holiday. If you don't know the real story behind the holiday, why is that? What do you know about the first Thanksgiving? You know, these are questions you have to ask yourself. Do I know the facts about the Thanksgiving, the person giving you this information? Yes, I'm going to tell you where I got it in some steps later on. Now, here's another one too, talking about the high-performing educator, talking about you want all your students to be culturally relevant today, and you want to know the facts and just be an excellent educator. Do you see any harm in teaching made-up, romanticized ideas about Thanksgiving? So it's like, on the one hand, you can teach the facts and teach culturally appropriate, relevant information to your students. Or, on the other hand, you can ignore all the facts that are there, and you can go ahead and go with the romanticized version of this. You know, it's okay, they're so young, they're not going to know. But believe me, right, we've all been a student here in the United States at some point. When you look back on your education and you know that your teacher gave you pilgrims and Indians to color, or they had you make those headdresses, what do you think of that educator? So in any regards, do you know about what the real Thanksgiving is? That is now step number one, right? This is what you should be doing as an educator. Number two, and I wrote these down because I wanted to get real in depth with them. Number two, if you choose not to learn the true history behind Thanksgiving, you need to accept responsibility for your lack of knowing or your refusal as an educator to learn about what the real Thanksgiving is. So you have a choice to spend time perpetuating the myth, the stereotype, the romanticized version of Thanksgiving, or you can spend time learning about the real Thanksgiving and being able to teach accountability and to be able to teach actual facts to your students. And later on down the road, trust me, they are going to appreciate that you went ahead and took the time to teach them real facts. Because then, well, later on, when students grow older, they're not going to have to deal with the lies my teacher told me, which I'm jumping ahead to another point here. But essentially, you will, as an educator, be seen in retrospect by many of your students as not knowing the true history, right? So understand that. So you have time as an educator, because the biggest thing I always get sometimes from educators, I don't have time to do that. Well, what is it that you have time to do? You have time to download or to pass out copies for your student to color in pilgrims and Indians. You have time to instruct your students on how to make, you know, construction paper type headdresses and feathers and little pilgrim hats. You have time to do that. What if you replace that time with actual knowing the real facts and adjusting and getting newer resources? So we have a choice. Time is going to pass us by no matter what. You not having time, you are spending time either perpetuating the romanticized version or learning about the real version and becoming a teacher that your students respect, right, at any age. And they can look back on this when they're 19 and they look back to their first grade experience. Oh my gosh, my teacher was really teaching me the real thing. She took time. She cared, you know. He cared enough. They cared enough. All right, number 3 of what you should be doing. Learn about the tribal nation that the Thanksgiving story encompasses about who they are today. Are they still alive? If you can't even answer that question, or immediately in your mind you're like, they're not even around today, Houston, we have a problem. So point number 3, you really want to learn about the Wampanoag tribe. That is the tribe that was involved in the very first Thanksgiving. If you've never heard of this tribe, this is a very good time to learn. I'm going to link some videos below so that you can hear directly from descendants of the ancestors who were involved in that. So again, learn about the Wampanoag tribe today as they are. It's so important to know and to acknowledge that they are still alive. Because acknowledging and knowing that this tribe is still alive kind of brings it more into a reality that I thought all Native Americans were gone. No, they're not. Native Americans are still very much alive. This is a very, very, very important fact that you as an educator should know, and you should definitely pass on to your students. Now, keep in mind when you start looking up information about the Wampanoag tribe as they are today, and maybe even speaking to me, or maybe even listening to me speak and looking at me, what you're seeing, we are not the stereotypical Hollywood versions of, because if as an educator, you don't even know that the tribe involved, who got involved in this romanticized version of a Thanksgiving, of a meeting, if you don't even know they're alive today, what does that say about the state of your knowing as an educator? Can you call yourself, a highly effective educator by missing these pieces that are so easy to look up? I'm going to say no, right? As an evaluator, as an admin, as someone who's a collegiate professor, if you're watching this, if you're not encouraging your students to be up to date and relevant because you're afraid of what they're going to think of you, that is not good teaching, right? We need to just make sure we're out there looking for facts, we're out there looking for education. There's places where you can find this. And then also, again, on YouTube, you could always look up more about their tribe in general and then go off of who they are today because they're alive today. Number 4, this is so important as an educator. If you're not doing this, I highly, highly, highly recommend you need to start. Examine what you, right, and even myself, examine what you were taught about the Thanksgiving when you were younger. And is it still relevant today? What you were taught, whatever age group you are, when you're coming to listen to me speak, what were you taught in the United States today about Thanksgiving? And if you aren't from the United States, but you teach in the United States, you still have a responsibility and accountability to take for what you have heard or what you have been taught about Thanksgiving at whatever age you are. And do you think about this when you are putting your lesson plans together? Are you thinking about what are the real facts of this holiday? What really happened? Who are the people really today? Is the tribe still alive? If you are a principal who has educators who are still putting out the old myth of the pilgrims and the headband, the construction paper headbands and anything about this, and you're defending your staff members, what does this say about yourself being an educator? Knowing that there's real facts out there about this. What does it say about your relationship to Native Americans? Because you probably don't know any, you don't sympathize, you don't empathize, and that's not kindness. The SEL the social emotional learning that everyone's always pushing in the school, be kind to one another. In order to be kind, you have to care. You can be nice and not care. And I think we get more niceness rather than true kindness. And if you don't go ahead and decide to go learn about the new Thanksgiving, that says something about you, right? That says something about your willingness to be the best educator you can. That says something about what you believe is worth your time. And Native American people and the first Thanksgiving is just not on your radar. But we can always change that. And maybe you never thought of it that way. You're just like, I didn't even think that this was an issue. So, which is why I'm giving you these tips. Okay, so that was number 4. Number 5. This is a huge one. And I know many people are still afraid to do this kind of thing. Number 5, have conversations with modern day Native Americans from various tribes or listen to them speak. You have to understand we have over 576 federally recognized tribes. The Thanksgiving story involves one of those tribes. But in turn, as Native American, as a whole entire group, people together, no matter where we're at, we're all faced with this. We're all put in Native Americans and pilgrims together, So there are so many different speeches on YouTube alone. There's Native Americans giving TED Talks about certain issues relating to Thanksgiving, to identity. There's a ton of information there. So do a search on YouTube alone, this platform that you're seeing this on. Native Americans talking about Thanksgiving. You will find videos. Now, this also goes back to what are you willing to put your time, what are you doing using your time? As an educator, should you choose to skip over this, what you're telling your students, what you're telling me, is you're not valuing the truth around the Thanksgiving holiday. You're not valuing learning more about Native American people, because what does it really matter to you? Well, it matters. It should matter to every person who is in the United States as a country. It should matter because we are still alive. We are not completely 100% conquered. There's land being given back to tribes all the time. Once a tribe gets federal recognition status, they get land back. So land is going back to many different Native tribes. So that's why it's important. It's not, we're done, Native Americans are conquered. No, this story is ongoing, right? So that's why it's so important. Where and who you get your information from matters. Okay, that was number 5. Number 6, here we go. Number 6, read The Lies My Teacher Told Me by James W. Lowen. You can listen to this. I don't have time to read. Well, if you have a commute, if you clean your house, you can go to YouTube, find the audiobook, or you could go download it as an audiobook, pay for it if you like to, and listen. He goes over all the things in the history books that if left unchecked as educators, especially when you get older, you're going to be perpetuating the romanticized version and making all these past presidents into a hero, not showing their faults, not showing exactly what their beliefs were and how faulty they were and how they perpetuated a lot of the systems that we're in today that hold a lot of people back, a lot of BIPOC people back. So read The Lies My Teacher Told Me. There's a whole section in there on the very first Thanksgiving. You can find that, again, it's free on YouTube. If you want to listen to the audiobook, just skip ahead. You can download the audiobook. You can go buy it in paperback if that's more your thing. Some people like paperback. They can underline. They could go straight to the chapter. It's a physical object. Go and read that book. And hopefully, I'll put some links below on James L. Lowen on some interviews, and also a link to one of the books where you can find it. Number 7, this is so important if you're going to be an educator. I'm an educator. I'm a lifelong educator. I'm never not going to be done. No matter how many degrees I have, no matter how many certifications you get, no matter how many cultures I go into or go into the same one over and over, there's never an end to the learning that is going to go on. And once you understand cultures, you know that cultures aren't stagnant. And somehow, the history books have painted Native Americans as these stagnant people way back before the 1900s, like we're not modern. So number 7 is my favorite. It's my favorite. So here we go. Updating and consistently fact-checking your lesson plans and resources, making sure they're culturally relevant. It's easy to make lesson plans. And you could be using lesson plans from the 1980s, from the 1950s. Well, we've always done this in my community. My mentor teacher, they gave me these handouts about Thanksgiving, putting the blame on somebody else when it is our responsibility to keep current, to make sure that we know what we're teaching, why we're teaching it, and how we're teaching it. This is my favorite one. It matters where you get your lesson plans. If the person you get your lesson plans from or you buy on Teachers Pay Teachers from has no experience with Native American people, they don't know anything, they haven't looked into Thanksgiving as a holiday, they don't care necessarily about the Native American people, they're going to be selling you things that perpetuate the stereotype, the romanticized version. Kids need to color, kids need to, learn about this romanticized story that never took place. It's not kind, the first Thanksgiving, when you get into the dynamics of it, but when you perpetuate a false narrative and you get resources that also perpetuate that false narrative, whoever it is and wherever it is that you're getting your resources, is not helping the climate today. It matters if you prefer buying stereotypical material versus authentic resources by Native American people. So there are different places you can go, but listening to a TED Talk for one on a Native person, I'm going to see if I could put some more resources down below on books and stuff you could get. But the most important thing is for your students to see you, us, the educator, to see us and what we know about these holidays, what we care about, and how we can guide them and guide our society as a whole to be recognizing and appreciative of the fact that we still have Native Americans, here in the United States. This Thanksgiving was not what it was meant to be. And it's turned into something, a more capitalized holiday as well. I'm not going over any of that necessarily in this right now. And then here's another point for you as educators. And last year, during this time, I was a middle school band director, and I'm going to put a link to the video that I showed all my music students, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I taught at a school that was primarily Mexican, and we had very few white kids, some Black, some Filipino Islanders, very few Native Americans, if that at all. But I showed them a video below. And then you need to be prepared with actual, factual answers when your students ask you. The typical response is to ignore the question. But when you ignore or you brush off a question to a student, it does show your inability to engage in what we're calling, social justice, social emotional learning, the social political status. Being a highly effective educator, these are things that you should know about. You should be able to answer your students why, well, yeah, they made up a fake story about the Thanksgiving because right? Come with your own answers, not a fabricated answers. If you ask me, well, how do I answer the question? I don't know how you answer that question because I don't know exactly everything you know. Your personal beliefs about all of this will affect how you choose to answer or your lack there and not answering. Choosing silence and to brush off a student, especially in middle school and high school on this subject, shows exactly where you stand. Kids are very, very, very intuitive. Every time my students ask me anything about Thanksgiving, do you celebrate it? Why don't you celebrate it? I tell them, and I tell them what I know to be true, what I think about, and the people. I know many different Native Americans. I know many different other cultures and how they celebrate the holiday. I know many other cultures don't even give a second thought as to any Native Americans on Thanksgiving because it's become something. Thanksgiving has become a different type of meaning gathering to people who aren't Native and who aren't from this country, right? And who haven't been fed the stereotypical version of what has happened, or they have been and they don't know anything about Natives and they don't know we're even alive today. I'm a modern day Native American. I am not set back in the 1900s. I extend that respect also to that tribe. And there's a reason why we're still here. So be prepared with factual, up-to-date information. And if you don't have up-to-date information, just understand, knowing about Native Americans, knowing about Thanksgiving, not having any facts about that only adds more to the plight that Native Americans face in this country, which is invisibility. And when you answer or you fail to answer, it also shows how much you don't know as an educator. So here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to come back into myself and just give you a little insight into a couple of things when I see people educators talking, or the lack thereof, about Thanksgiving, about what they teach. When someone tells me, well, I don't think it's important that kids need to know a story. Well, I don't really need to know that. It's not that important. Or they go silent, or they don't even have an answer. Well, what do you teach your students about Thanksgiving? Well, I teach them about how thankful they could be for everything. I think that's one aspect that we can go. As Native American people, we are thankful. But as an educator, you're the person who's in the classroom, whether you're with middle school, high school, collegiate kids, young kids, and your inability to answer with factual information. For me, as a peer-to-peer, as colleague to colleague, when I see that an educator has not taken the time to really learn about what the Thanksgiving culture is, or behind it, about Native Americans or anything, it leads me to think, what other holidays and what other cultures are you not caring to look up when the information is so readily available? And if you're an evaluator, an admin, and I've seen this happen so many times. I'm not a teacher anymore. I'm here to help more of you, to create resources for more of you who want to be a highly effective educator. But when you have admin and you have professors in college who give you high ratings, oh, your lesson plan is put together so great, it's typed up, it's color coded, you could really see everything. But in that lesson plan are perpetuating stereotypes all over the place. If you're an admin or a professor, that should not get a highly effective rating. That should not pass the test on this educator is ready to educate. And if you're thinking, but I don't want to cause problems, I don't want to cause dissension. Well, if you look at it this way, education is supposed to be handing down information that is factual. Factual. We are not supposed to be making space for teachers' feelings and not creating waves. Let's just let them put the false facts out there. Let's just let them continue just let them continue stereotypes that are out there harming other groups. You have to weigh what you're going to do. But at no point am I ever going to think, wow, that's a really great professor, that's a really great principal, when I see you're still allowing, oh my gosh, you're still allowing your students to dress up as pilgrims and wear headdresses. You're still allowing which classes want to be Indians, which classes want to be pilgrims, when you're still allowing this romanticized version of something that should not be romanticized with one tribe. You're not even naming the tribe. There's no way that should be considered highly effective, a good ranking school, even if that school has 4 stars, 3 stars, whatever the rating it is. So I always receive, on my timeline, I do have a lot of Native American friends, and on my timeline for Facebook or even emails, I get things sent to me on, look at what they sent home with my child. Having Native American children dress up as pilgrims going to school for the colonialism day. Hello, that is not okay. That is harmful. Having a Native American child dress as something that they are not. Even if they were dressed as a Native, dressed as a tribe that wasn't your tribe. This is just inaccurate. So if you are ready to hear all this information and you are willing to do all these 7 things, thank you so much for listening to me. And if you were listening to me and you were like, well, I don't think it's that important, or you found things offensive to what I was saying, that's just a cue for yourself, just knowing that you're not ready to be a highly effective educator, right? You still would rather believe romanticized versions of people as long as your own comfort is intact. Being a highly effective educator and being able to talk to so many different cultures and being inclusive and really caring about them requires you to learn uncomfortable facts, maybe about your own culture and how you work with things. Are you going to get it right 100% of the time? No. But you can move closer to that the more you really start interacting with other cultures. So this was a long video. I'm making these videos and I'm going in depth because I want educators to really understand this. And now those were 7 points that I had to write down. But understand, when I go into a classroom, all of these points that I have for you that I just had to write down and organize my thoughts, these are all the things that already go on in my mind. Whether or not I have a PowerPoint, whether or not I have a checklist, these are things that I inherently know, and I will just automatically encapsulate them into my teaching. This is what makes a highly effective educator effective. You go in there with the knowledge, already knowing the knowledge, and then whatever questions come at you, you don't fold under different questions. You're not left blank, like, I didn't even know how to answer that. When you continually update and consistently always look for the correct information about all our holidays, you want to show each and every culture as they are today. That right there, my friend, if you are that, you are such a treasure in the teaching place that you're in. So I'm going to go ahead and end the video with this. This is my follow-up to 7 things you shouldn't be doing, teaching about Thanksgiving. These are 7 things you should be doing. So with that, I'll see you all later. Sa'a Panidoa. I hope you have a great day.